So you've got to start with creating some space in your schedule where you can actually slow down and begin to feel your feelings. The only way to truly process our feelings and move through our emotions is to feel them. It's the only way. There's no other magic substitute for that.
You're listening to Make Some Noise podcast, episode number 445 with guest Dr. Shyamala Kiru. Welcome to Make Some Noise podcast, your guide for strategies, tools, and insight to empower yourself. I'm your host, Andrea Owen, global speaker, entrepreneur, life coach since 2007, and author of 3 books that have been translated into 18 languages and are available in 22 countries. Each week, I'll bring you a guest or a lesson that will help you maximize unshakable confidence, master resilience, and make some noise in your life. You ready? Let's go. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I am so glad that you are here. You know, I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts. I've been listening to a lot of Maintenance Phase lately. If you haven't listened to it, it's really great. And I had it on in the car, and then I have it when I'm making breakfast. And I just love having their voices on, entertaining me, informing me. And I thought to myself, I think people probably do the same thing with my podcast. So if you do, thank you. Thank you for having me join you in whatever task, endeavor, exercise, anything that you do. I am just so honored to be able to join you in those moments. When this podcast drops, I am going to be speaking in Philadelphia at the Empower Women's Leadership Conference. I'm really excited. It's just such an amazing group of women. It just got me thinking, if you are a part of a company who has events or trainings or conferences, I might be a great speaker for you. I have 4 main keynotes. This time I'm speaking on resilience, which seems to be one that people are picking a lot lately, you know, because of obvious reasons. I have one on resilience. I have one on confidence. That one is mostly for a women's audience, the confidence keynote. And I also have 2 other keynotes, one on corporate wellness that revolves around the things that we do to kind of numb out and check out of our life. How do we have better coping skills? And then one that is specifically on recovery. And those are for recovery conferences and things like that. So it's at andreaowen.com/speaking. And that outlines all of my keynotes. My speakers reel is over there. And then you can inquire and get any more information that you might want. All right. This is our last episode on the therapy modalities, healing, and it's a good transition over into relationships. I am so excited to have you hear this conversation. Dr. Shyamala is here with us, and she's talking about emotional intelligence. And one of the very first questions I asked her, which I hadn't planned, was like, what actually is it? What is emotional intelligence? So she'll tell us what that is, as well as we do spend a decent amount of time talking about communication skills, which is incredibly helpful. And in her expert opinion is, can make or break your success, both in your personal life and your professional life. And she talks about how you can leverage your emotional intelligence. She has these 4 pillars. She'll get into it. I won't tell you any more. Let me tell you a little bit about her for those who don't know her. Dr. Shyamala is an ex-therapist turned relationship and leadership expert with 20 years experience. The EQ Code, her global coaching company, trains professional women to master their emotions, communicate fearlessly, and lead with confidence so they can execute their mission at a whole new level. She is also the founder of the Kiru Psychotherapy Clinic, podcast host, and has appeared on national television as a media expert for over a decade. So without further ado, here is Dr. Shyamala. Shyamala, thank you so much for being here.
Andrea, I'm so excited to be here. I feel like we connected quickly a little while ago, and then this interview was in the calendar, and I've been looking forward to it ever since.
Oh, thank you. I never get tired of talking to smart women about big topics. My friend Amy Smith, and that's one of the ways we're connected, calls it shit that matters. And I'm like, yes.
That sounds like an Amy-ism.
It is. We need a whole book of Amy-isms. And I want to jump in right away because, well, You know where I want to start? Because we've talked about emotional intelligence a fair amount on this show previously, but can you define just what that means for someone who has heard the term so many times, but they're not 100% clear on what does emotional intelligence actually look like?
Okay. Great place to start and to jump in. And I think if you were to, probably all of your guests may have a different definition of this. I'll define it the way that we define it in my corner of the world. So I think about emotional intelligence as sort of landing within two main buckets. The first bucket, I would say, is all about the skills that pertain to self-management. So all about how do I manage self? So that encompasses for me things like mindset, the subconscious mind, limiting beliefs. Of course, we want to develop empowering beliefs, self-regulation, emotion regulation, sense of self, identity. There's like lots and lots of beautiful things for me that reside within the bucket of self, or as it's traditionally been called in emotional intelligence, is self-management. The other bucket is relationship management. I don't like the terms management, but that's traditionally, what it's been called within the sphere of emotional intelligence. And within relationship management, Andrea, we have beautiful things like attachment styles. We have things like understanding how to navigate the space between togetherness and separateness. We have things like, how do you show up as a leader? How do you show up at home? Communication skills, boundary settings. So I think about relationship management, emotional intelligence as the intersection between these two big, robust, beautiful buckets of managing self and managing others.
I didn't plan to ask you that question, but my eyes landed on emotional intelligence. And I thought, I wonder if there's people out there who think they have a pretty good grasp on it and just want to make sure. That's how I am sometimes. But I love that explanation. I've never heard it explained that way, because if I had to tell someone, I would simply put it as it's a way for you to recognize your own emotions and be able to manage them and have emotional boundaries. And that would be the simplicity of it for me. But I love how you expanded on it. And I love the buckets too, the metaphor of the buckets. So thank you. Thank you for starting us off that way. So you talk about how there's a connection between our emotional intelligence and our capacity for success, both personally and professional success. So can you talk about that?
Yes. Oh my gosh. You are asking all the right questions today, Andrea.
Oh, you're welcome.
It's almost as if I've pressed you a few times, apparently. So this question I love because number one, what I'm going to share with you is something I've experienced personally. It's something I've experienced professionally with clients, but it's something that the research also points to and indicates. So the research tells us that over 85% of our financial success is actually tied to our emotional intelligence.
Stop it. Are you serious?
Yes.
I have never heard that statistic before.
Yes.
That's incredible.
Yes. And I actually bet it's a little higher, to be honest with you. And I also believe that they use the terms financial success. I really believe this is true of our personal success as well. And I think it's, we could unpack the word success and really what that means, because I think it means different things to different people. And I don't know about you, but for me, success at home, looks different from success in the workforce, right? Like at home, it's about connection,
but different.
Yes,
yeah.
But it sort of shows up differently. And it feels different and all those sorts of things. But yeah, it's over 85% of our success is tied to skills and emotional intelligence, and specifically the ability to communicate, negotiate, and lead.
Okay. Communicate, negotiate, and lead, which that makes sense in its connection to emotional intelligence.
Yes. Right. And so when you think about, and this is why for me, when I think about emotional intelligence, it has to have those two buckets, because the management of self, I think, ties to the management of relationships in terms of how we communicate. How do we negotiate our relationships? How are we leading? And again, I consider us in leadership positions, both personally and professionally. You know what I mean? Like in our
Yeah.
relationships, like even intimate relationships.
I
Like
tell people that all the time. Yeah. You have leadership positions, even if you are a stay-at-home parent.
Absolutely. Like actually a massive leadership
Right.
position if you're a stay-at-home, to be honest, right? Like
True.
really.
Okay. Now the wheels are turning with that statistic and what the science tells us. And I was thinking about, I wrote a little bit about money in my last book, And Make Some Noise. And it's all about, you know, how our culture has raised women to, you know, be a certain way. And when it comes to money, many times, and statistics show us that we don't invest as much as our male counterparts. We don't negotiate as much in salaries at jobs, et cetera, et cetera. And I think about my own experience with, I have like no experience negotiating salary. Really,
right.
When I was in corporate America. And also when I was in my 20s and even in my 30s and having a financial advisor, which actually, to be fair, came sort of by accident because it was attached to my former husband, like his parents kind of had. So I wouldn't have sought out a financial advisor, but for so long, I had no idea what they were talking about. And I was too embarrassed and ashamed to ask questions. So once I started to do my own work and understand how important it was to be vulnerable and sit in the discomfort of asking questions, and it took me a long time to be able to meet with this person and have them talk to me and interrupt and say, I'm sorry, I have no idea what that means. Like, what is the difference between this? And why does it matter? And and also even to be as vulnerable and say, can you draw this out for me? Because I don't know if it's my ADD or what, but when someone explains, I can't picture it. Anyway, all that to say, it's, I believe it. I believe that 85%, and it's taken a lot of vulnerability and a lot of questions for me to be in a very different financial position than I was 15 years ago.
Well, and I hear in that, like giving yourself permission, like giving yourself permission to ask the questions that you need to ask, right? Giving yourself permission that you're not an expert in, giving yourself permission to take up space, giving yourself permission to slow down the conversation when needed. Right? Like all of those sorts of pieces for me still land. I don't know, maybe I'm just so like, I've been in the field for so long that it's hard for me to see these skills as not part of emotional intelligence, if that makes sense. Like all of that for me, giving yourself permission for all of those things are all part of emotional intelligence, right? Because you would have had to do some mindset work.
Yeah.
Right? To even be able to do that, to have those kinds of conversations, you would have had to overturn probably some limiting beliefs. And you would have had to communicate assertively.
Right. Just hopefully this helps people listening, because one of the perspective shifts that was helpful for me to start asking questions, all of the questions, like bare bones, basic questions when it came to investing and retirement funds and all of those things, was I thought to myself, if I had a brand new client and maybe this person had never had a coach before, I would never expect them to totally understand all of the jargon and tools and things that I was teaching them and working with them with coming in. Like it's literally my job to help them. So why on earth do I think that it's my job that I should know all of these things about investing in retirement funds and all the different names and what is a SEP? Like, what does that mean? What is a SEP IRA? Like, what?
Right.
I don't know. And yes, we have Google and we can do all of these things, but that's what you pay these people for. So I'm going to get off my soapbox about finance, but it's their job. It's their job to teach you and help you. Okay. Shopify's already taken the cash register online, helping millions sell billions around the world. But did you know that Shopify can do the same thing at your retail store? Give your point of sale system a serious upgrade with Shopify. With Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that effortlessly unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. Track every sale across your business in one place and know exactly what's in stock. Connect with customers inline and online. Shopify helps you drive store traffic with plug-and-play tools built for marketing campaigns from TikTok to Instagram and beyond. Get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone, transform your tablet into a point of sale system, or use Shopify's POS Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/noise, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/noise to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/noise. It's hard to find a great mentor who can help me level up. My dream mentor, Shonda Rhimes. So I was really excited when I heard she has a class on Masterclass. With Masterclass, you can learn from the best to become your best. Masterclass is the only streaming platform where you can learn and grow with over 200 plus of the world's best. For just $10 a month, an annual membership with Masterclass gets you unlimited access to every instructor. And you can access Masterclass on your phone, computer, smart TV, or even in audio mode. I'm always looking for ways to be a better writer, so I took Shonda Rhimes' screenwriting class. It helped me gain concrete technical advice, including structuring, the writing process, and with shows under her belt like Grey's Anatomy and Bridgerton, it was so helpful. Plus, every new membership comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Don't wait another moment to start your learning journey with Masterclass. Right now, our listeners get an additional 15% off any annual membership at masterclass.com/Andrea. That's 15% off at masterclass.com/Andrea. Masterclass.com/Andrea. So you talk about 4 pillars of the EQ code, and EQ is sort of the acronym for emotional intelligence. Why don't they call it EI?
You know what? I'm so glad you're probably the first, interviewer that's asked me that question. But it's the question that I had when I first came across that term. I'm like, why didn't they? So here's why I think they didn't. Because when EQ, emotional intelligence, really sort of quote unquote came on the scene, and it was a big thing. And, when it first came on the scene, it wasn't used necessarily in areas of like coaching or even in therapy mainstream. And things like, no, it wasn't. It was really in the corporate sector, right? So it was being taught in the corporate sector. I used to be in corporate Canada. I'm Canadian before I became a therapist, but it was used in the corporate sector, and it was used as part of leadership development for the top tier leaders.
Okay.
And so I don't know. This is my guess. There's no research to back this up, but I think they called it EQ because they wanted to differentiate it and almost juxtapose it to IQ.
Okay.
Because, right? When we first started learning and researching and really looking into what they called soft skills, emotional intelligence skills, they were like, oh, these are completely different from technical skills or sort of the IQ, right? So one of the things that we would often talk about in the space is that you might score really, really high on IQ, but score really, really low on EQ.
I've met those people.
Well, yes, we all, I believe we all have, which is kind of funny. And we can laugh about that. But that's the best explanation I have for it. But I agree, because even when we decided to call our company the EQ code, my marketing team was like, Shyamala, no one knows what EQ is. I'm like, I know, but it just, it is what it is. And it will spark conversation. And I use emotional intelligence, right? I use emotional intelligence, in everything I say. So, but that's, it's EQ is
maybe you should make a YouTube video about it, because there probably are people who are Googling it. I assumed that it stood for emotional quotient or something, some other word that they decided was too confusing, or anyway. Okay. That was not the original question. I sometimes I blurt things out that run through my mind. Okay. So 4 pillars of the EQ code. Can you briefly explain them and how each pillar helps women master every area of their life and take as much time as you need?
Okay, sure.
Easy question.
It's not an easy question. And please stop me, because I could talk about this all day. So stop me when I've taken too much time. So to understand this, so one of the things, I'll back up a little bit. So my background and how I came to this is I spent about 20 years as a psychotherapist, specializing in couple and family therapy. So my doctoral degree is in couple and family therapy. So once I decided I wanted to move out of psychotherapy, so I don't practice one-to-one psychotherapy anymore, I decided I wanted to move into the coaching space. I wanted to move into the coaching space with taking sort of everything I've learned and a framework that women could utilize in a bit of a step-by-step way with support for integration and all of those sorts of things, that would allow them to achieve the goals that I was primarily seeing in my practice. Like what women were really struggling with, what they really wanted, what they desired, like all those sorts of things. So that's sort of the background to how I sort of came up with and developed these 4 pillars. So it's the intersection between who we are individually and how we relate to our world and the people in it. So with that said, the first pillar of success that we use, we call it emotional mastery. And what that actually means is really learning how to feel calm and confident regardless of external circumstances. It's important for me to say emotional mastery doesn't mean you don't feel things and you don't get upset and you don't get activated and you don't get dysregulated. That's not at all what it means. Because that happens to me every single day, right? I had a moment of total dysregulation this morning as I was getting my daughter off to school. So it happens every day. So, but what it means is that we have the skills so that we can choose to feel calm and confident regardless of what's happening outside of us. So that's for me what emotional mastery is. And that's the foundation of really and truly everything we do and teach and train inside of the EQ code. And this would encompass things that you're probably familiar with, Andrea, like skills around self-regulation, reprogramming the subconscious mind, reprogramming and repatterning, old ways of thinking about ourselves and relationships, our worth, all those sorts of things, our role, all the deeper work is what's encompassed for me in the emotional mastery pillar. The second pillar is what we call fearless communication. And again, I always have to explain these terms because what I mean when I say fearless communication is not that you don't feel afraid when you're having a difficult conversation, but it's that you have the courage and the integrity to have the difficult conversation, say what you really need to say, ask for what you really need to ask for, regardless of the outcome of that conversation. And one of the things I think that keeps women from having the conversations that we need to have is that we get really tied and fixated on the outcome, like wanting a conversation to go a certain way. And then that's what dysregulates us. And that's what activates the fear response in such a profound way that we often end up not having the conversation. Or we choose some of the more toxic styles of communication, like the passive style or the passive aggressive style, aggressive style, right? Rather than communicating assertively. So that's fearless communication. Third pillar, we call it elevated relationships. And what I mean by that is the ability to set boundaries without feeling guilty, the ability to, when you're, in a relationship, let's say it's an intimate relationship, you're able to maintain your sense of self, like maintain your sense of who you are, while simultaneously really being able to take risks, let your guard down, get close, right? Experience the fullness of intimacy without losing yourself inside of it. So that's for me, those are just some of the skills inside of the elevated relationships pillar. And then the final one, we use this pillar. We have 2 main programs that we offer. One is the relationship lab and one is the leadership lab. So the fourth pillar we only use inside of our leadership lab, which is really for entrepreneurs. And this is where we integrate those 3 pillars and we learn how to lead with confidence. That's what we call it. And it's really about the ability to make decisions that are aligned with our values rather than decisions that meet other people's expectations.
Ooh, that's a big one.
It's a big one, It's one that I'm still working on every day. So those are sort of the, and again, it's, if you ask me 10 years from now, they might shift and they might be different, but I'm 45 and I stopped practicing psychotherapy I guess it's been over a year now. So over a year ago, I still maintain my clinic, still lead my team. And that's sort of the culmination of my 2 decades of work and really saying, okay, these are the key areas where most of the women in my world anyway, really were desiring support.
I want to circle back to elevated relationships and ask you a question about that, because you said, one of the examples was setting boundaries without feeling guilty. And can you talk about what that looks like? I immediately thought of someone dear to me in my life who has had to set a no contact boundary with a parent. And it's been a long process. And I think that's, I mean, I don't like to rank things, but it seems to me like that's probably one of the most difficult boundaries to set in one's life. And the guilt is overwhelming for this person. And I'm asked this question, like, how do I get rid of the mom guilt? How do I get rid of the guilt? And my professional opinion is sometimes it's always there, and it's about managing it more so than eradicating it. So what is your opinion on that?
Yeah, I love this question. And I would actually agree with you. I think setting a boundary with a parent is one of the most challenging things to do. And it's also one of, like, if we're able to renegotiate our relationships with our parents via our adult self, you would be amazed at what a massive difference it makes in your overall confidence. In
you
every
mean
part of your
versus
life.
like setting it from your like unconscious inner child?
Yeah. Or like still relating to your parent as a child, which a lot of us do unless we're intentional about, So anyway, side note there on that, but I agree with you on that. So setting boundaries without guilt. Here's what I mean by that. So do you remember when we talked about the framework? I said the emotional mastery piece is the foundation. So in that phase of work, we are working in a very focused way to reprogram the subconscious. So when we consistently have feelings of guilt around putting ourselves first, setting boundaries, making decisions that are aligned for us and might disappoint others, that guilt has been programmed into our subconscious mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, totally. Right? Yeah.
And
I'm assuming like it's there in many ways, or maybe just in some ways, as a survival mechanism, so we'll stay with our community and stay, within ranks of certain people to survive.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you think about like our subconscious mind is often programmed and developed between the ages of 0 to 7, we're very small and vulnerable and, all of those sorts of things. And so survival, connection, belonging, acceptance, all of those needs would have been very, very primary and primal to us at that time. And so we learned to feel guilty when we let people down. We learn to feel bad, right? Like a lot of women will say, I feel bad. Like I feel so bad about that.
Like a terrible kid. Yeah.
Like a terror. Exactly. Right. It goes back to that. I feel like a bad girl. Like I need to be this good girl programming. So it goes very, very deep. So when I say to women that I work with, like we can actually learn to set boundaries without guilt. What I mean is like, that's the long game. Like we can get to a place where we have really repatterned and reprogrammed those neural pathways around how we see ourselves in relation to others, that it doesn't trigger that guilt response. But it takes time. That's not going to happen right away, right? So to reprogram and repattern a response, because that's all it is. Guilt is just a response.
Yeah.
Right? It's a response. So to reprogram and repattern a response like guilt, it's 2 things. One, it's working at the level of the subconscious to really shift what's happening in there. But the second thing is taking action that aligns with the new belief you want to hold.
Taking action with a new belief that you want to hold. I have definitely been in that place where my paycheck ran out before the next one got here. Life doesn't happen bi-weekly, so why should payday? The money you earn can be in your hands today with Earnin. Earnin is an app that gives you access to your pay as you work, up to $100 per day or up to $750 per pay period. Just download the Earnin app and verify your paycheck. Then access up to $100 a day as you work and leave an optional tip. Any money you access plus tips are automatically repaid from your next paycheck. You can use Earnin to pay for a girls' night out, a last-minute gift for a loved one, or even summer camp for the kids. Make Earnin a part of your financial routine and join Earnin's over 3.5 million customers who say things like, when I think about Earnin, I think about financial stability, security. It gives me a lot of peace of mind. Download Earnin today, spelled EARNIN in the Google Play or Apple App Store. When you download the Earnin app, type in noise under podcast when you sign up. It really, really helps the show. Noise under podcast. Subject to your available earnings, location, daily max, and pay period max. See earnin.com/TOS for details. Earnin is a financial technology company, not a bank. Bank products are issued by Evolve Bank and Trust, member FDIC. Today's podcast is sponsored by MIDI Health. Ladies, are you over 40 like me and dealing with hot flashes, insomnia, brain fog, moodiness, some vaginal dryness, or weight gain? Don't just accept it as part of aging. These symptoms are often linked to hormonal changes during perimenopause and menopause. At MIDI Health, they get it. Their experts know what you're going through and how to help. MIDI clinicians are menopause specialists offering safe, effective, FDA-approved solutions. And guess what? MIDI care is covered by insurance. So stop pushing through it alone. Schedule a virtual visit and dive deep into your unique symptoms and health background. You'll walk away feeling heard and with a plan to start feeling better. Visit MIDI Health today and reclaim your well-being. You deserve to feel great. Book your virtual visit today at joinmidi.com. That's joinmidi.com. joinmidi.com. Okay.
Right.
So give us a quick example of that.
Yes.
Based on the example that I gave.
So let's say my good girl belief, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like is that it's my job to make my mother happy. Let's just use a really concrete, right? It's my job to make my mom happy. She's getting older. It's my job to make sure she's happy, that she's not stressed, that, all those sorts of things. So that's the limiting belief that activates guilt for me, right? And probably keeps me from making decisions that align with my goals, my desires, my values. Yes?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the new belief could be something like, I am not responsible for other people's feelings. I am responsible for living in alignment with my values.
For how I show up. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Like, and it can, there's lots of different ways that we could reposition that belief so that it really fits the individual. Like, I don't believe in, just standard affirmations, or I think it really needs to fit for you and your particular life and your particular circumstances, for your subconscious mind to actually buy it and be willing to even play with it.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I'm having like some aha moments over here. It's so interesting. A few things. I was watching it was continuing education with Dr. Gabor Mate, and he talks about, childhood trauma, et cetera. And he had a woman that sort of raised her hand and said, I don't feel like anything bad or hard happened as a child. And he was like, okay, he invites people up to the stage, and she said, she was talking about her childhood and said, I was loved so much. And, but she had a pretty typical childhood, I think, especially for people, elder millennials, Generation X, and maybe all millennials and maybe everyone, the family that just doesn't talk about hard things. They sweep things under the rug. We have happy talks. We have happy thoughts. Everyone's happy here. I often kind of joke, like in my family, it was, if you had anything else besides happiness, you went and did that in your room on your own.
Right.
And that was her experience. I resonated so much. I could totally relate. And then he said, is that where you decided that you were then responsible for everyone's happiness? And I was like, shut up.
Mhm. Yes. Right.
Because my therapist for so long, starting from my 20s, had to remind me over and over again. I can't tell you how many times I sat in her office and her reminding me, you are not responsible for your father's emotions. You are not responsible. And so it just is fascinating to think about how even the best intended parents, and I've come to that acceptance. I don't know if you have too, or other parents out there are listening to this. My children will end up talking about me in therapy. There will be something that I did.
Yes, absolutely.
That will hurt them. That will not be as I intended to. It's their experience. But thank you for giving that example and talking about the long game and how it is something that we will likely have to work on, at least on a fairly consistent basis. It might be kind of like our thing, if you will, to use quotes to keep coming back to. Well, on the topic of communication, why do you think communication skills can make or break success specifically?
Yeah, it's interesting because, we've talked in our conversation today about management of self and management of relationships, right? And the intersection between the two. And the way I see and view communication skills is they're like a bridge, right? So if you think of self and then you think of the other, whoever that other is, for me, communication skills are the set of skills that bridges that gap. Right? Like it's the set of skills that we would use to connect with the other. It's the set of skills that we would use to deepen a relationship. It's also the set of skills that can get us into a lot of trouble in relationships or make it very difficult for us to navigate our relationships. And in my work, both as, when I was practicing, my practice when I was practicing was very heavily focused on couples. And it was definitely the one set of skills that would get people stuck more than anything else. Like, I can't even tell you how many times I had people say I have no idea how to resolve this issue. I have no idea how to say this to my partner. I have no idea how
in
to
circles. That's what I call it.
Right?
I think every couple's experienced that.
For sure. And the level of distress, I don't know if I've personally experienced it. I've personally had the experience of, I know in my gut, I need to say something, or I need to have this conversation, or I need to express this thing that I'm feeling inside. And I feel so stuck. I feel like my emotions are, all over the place. And how do I say it? And I'm thinking about the other person. And so it's a very, very common experience. And so for me, one of the areas that I think I've personally made a massive shift in that has had a dramatic impact on how I show up to my own relationships at home, as well as how I show up, as a leader for the businesses that I run, as well as how I show up, publicly, whether I'm speaking or whatever it is, it's my communication skills.
Yeah.
It comes back to that. And I often think about it, if there was one set of skills that I probably get asked to teach and train on more than anything else, it's communication. No one, no one's right? If no one really comes to me as help me reprogram all my subconscious, but that's not the sexy, right? Nobody really wants to do that. We do it because we have to. But really what people ask for and want and realize they really need our communication skills. I think we all innately sort of know it absolutely can make or break our success.
Yes. And I think you're right. That last part, we innately know, but I was, and you explained it very well. What does that actually look like? And I wonder if, I'm not surprised that the biggest thing people are looking for to have you talk about, train and teach is on communication. And this is just my hypothesis. I wonder if it has something to do with the fact that it's universal that we've been in a position in a relationship, whether it's at work or a romantic relationship or even a friendship, where we don't feel like we're being heard. And then the other person likely feels the same way. And then you go around in circles, and then the emotions rise. until there's a big fight, until people are being passive aggressive or stonewalling or whatever it is that their style is when people get hurt and angry and frustrated. And I wonder if many times we want the skills for selfish reasons because we want the other person to hear us.
Yes. Yes.
That's our number one priority. Like, of course we want to like work things out and be able to hear their side and be able to communicate, with reciprocity, but also I want you to hear me. I want you to understand, not just hear me.
Yes. I think you're so bang on. And I mean, I work with professional women, but I also work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and like for entrepreneurs, like this, it's like the number one skill that they desire and they come to me for, because they realize it actually does have a significant impact. Just like the research says, 85% on our financial success, right? Like it really impacts how we attract and retain clients. To be honest with you, like if we were going to get really like down to the nitty gritty of business growth and entrepreneurship, and it has a huge impact on ability to attract and retain clientele in any business. Doesn't matter the industry.
That's interesting and not surprising when you think about it. But what I have seen happen in my own, not just this marriage that I'm in, but like previous relationships is when you don't hear each other, and when you have a communication breakdown, which inevitably will happen, then I think each partner starts jockeying to prove to the other person who has it worse. It's like, I'm the most hurt. You're not going to tell me that your hurt or frustration or anger or sadness or whatever is worse than mine. And then when you get to that place, I think it's like nobody's listening to each other. And
that's right.
Luckily, I recognize that place, and that where I'm like, all right, now we need to call in the supervisors, AKA therapists.
Yeah.
Because we're not getting anywhere.
Right.
Even with all of my communication skills. And to be honest, my kids are 14 and 12 now. And that is the one thing, because I didn't get that growing up and have learned it as an adult. It's the one thing that I am teaching my children, and I have gotten it wrong so many times. I think I tried to like teach big concepts when they were little, but what I feel like has worked the most is just having conversations about big topics and making them not a big deal. Of course, age appropriate, but I just want my kids to know that there is no topic that's off limits.
Of course.
Even if I fundamentally disagree, I want to be able to have honest and open conversations, and for them to know that they can come and talk to me about anything. And even just that, I feel like.
Well, and it's huge. Like, so I have a 12-year-old daughter, and I can totally relate to everything you're saying. And it's fascinating to me how much parenting has shifted. From I feel like we're this like mid-generation, right? Like from how our parents parented to how we're parenting. There's such a huge shift, because one of the biggest pieces I see that's different about how we parent today is we place a ton of value on emotional intelligence in parenting. Like,
generally speaking, yes, I agree with that.
Right? Like it's so interesting. And you're right. And I think about that often, like what you just said, no topic is off limits. Whereas I remember growing up, I was very aware of all the topics that were off limits, right? Don't you dare go there.
Don't even say it out loud.
Don't even think it. Like,
don't even make a list.
I think it's such a beautiful shift. And I have no doubt the next generation will just like take it even further. Right.
I'm so excited for them. Yeah. I'm worried for, the other reasons, world problems, et cetera, environmental problems, et cetera, et cetera. However, I'm excited for this generation, and I get emotional about it often, seeing things on TV. And anyway, I have one more question for you, and then I want you to tell people where they can go to get more of you. So what are some ways, maybe like a first steps type of thing, that a woman can leverage emotional intelligence in her life?
Great question. So if you're listening to this and it's like, oh, what the heck is this? Like communication, boundaries, guilt. I've got all kinds of guilt. The first place to start, I would say, is creating some space, because I realize that most women don't have a lot of space in their lives and in their schedules for themselves. So you've got to start with creating some space in your schedule where you can actually slow down and begin to feel your feelings. I actually did, it'll be gone by the time this episode is aired, but I did a little Instagram story yesterday about this very thing because we were talking about it on one of my coaching calls. Is there's a massive difference between thinking your feelings and feeling your feelings.
I made a TikTok about that, like the over intellectualization of it. Yeah,
totally.
I'm a master at that.
Right? Like, I feel very bitter about this whole thing. Like, that's not feeling your feelings. Like, it's thinking your feelings. It is a level of awareness,
sure,
in that you're identifying. But the only way to truly process our feelings and move through our emotions is to feel them. It's the only way. There's no other magic, substitute for that. So if you're going to start somewhere, I would invite you into a daily practice, because, here's the news, ladies, is this, like, you got to practice this stuff every single day. A daily practice of carving out, it doesn't have to be long. It can be 5 minutes of slowing down and turning inward to actually feel your feelings so that you're better able to process them. That's the first step in the foundation of emotion regulation and emotional mastery.
Well, I've been saying the same thing. So I love it when experts come on here and echo what I've been teaching. I don't think that the intellectualizing and the thinking about emotions is bad per se. It's just, it can be a bit of a coping mechanism. Would you agree?
Listen, I think it's useful. I actually think, and there are times where we need to feel our feelings. And then there are times where we need to move into that, like, simple cognitive awareness of our feelings, right? Like when we're going in to have a difficult conversation. So these are different pathways and different approaches we can take. And I, don't discount any of them. But if we're looking at really where we want to start to move towards our most emotionally intelligent self, we need to process. And so that for me is a really great place to begin the practice of accessing the emotionally intelligent woman within yourself.
Fantastic. Okay. So you are at theeqcode.com. Is there anywhere else that you want to send people specifically?
Instagram's a great place. Come find me on Instagram. I know, Andrea, you'll link it up for your listeners. Dr.Shyamala Kiru. Better that you find it in the show notes, because it's a tricky one to spell. Yeah.
Go to the show notes, everybody, and I'll link to her Instagram account.
Dr.Shyamala Kiru. And if you go to that link in bio, that's where, if we've got a free masterclass happening, if we've got something going on, you will find it all there. And if you go to eqcode.com, right on the homepage, you will see a freebie. Like, there's a free emotional intelligence audit that you can take that will help you to understand where you rank today in terms of this set of skills.
Ooh, I love a good quiz/audit. I am going to go check that out too. Thank you so much for being here. This has been such a fun and insightful conversation. I am so grateful. And to everyone listening, thank you so much for your time. I'm incredibly grateful that you choose to spend it here with my guests and myself. And remember, it's our life's journey to make ourselves better humans and our life's responsibility to make the world a better place. Bye for now. Hey everyone, thanks again for listening to the show. And just a quick reminder that if your company needs a speaker or a trainer, I might be the right person for you. I speak and do keynotes on confidence and resilience for mixed audiences, as well as do trainings on the Daring Way, which is the methodology based on the research of Dr. Brené Brown. So if you think it might be a good fit, hit me up at support@AndreaOwen.com or head over to my speaking page, AndreaOwen.com/speaking.
I'd like to introduce you to the Minimalist Moms podcast. It's hard enough being a mom, and the last thing you need is stress from too much stuff and an overcrowded schedule. For too long, I lived with the mindset that bigger was better, and the more I added to my life, instead of feeling better, I felt overwhelmed. It was time for a radical new mindset. Less is more. I'm not into extremes. I didn't throw everything away. My brand of minimalism is more about adding than subtracting. Get rid of the excess to make room for what you love. In other words, it's about living life with purpose. I hope you'll listen in, and my guest and myself can inspire you to think more and do with less. The Minimalist Moms podcast, available wherever you listen to podcasts.